In September, October 2009, we did about a 7-day tour of England, or the United Kingdom, which includes England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland and the outer islands. We started that in London and we used the hop-on, hop-off bus service as our main mode of transport. The British Museum was one of my favourites in London, and here's a photograph of the front entrance to the museum. My wife insists on selfies, so we spent a bit of time in the Egyptian exhibit, and you've got to read the story about the Rosetta Stone to understand how hieroglyphics came about. Basically, the Rosetta Stone was found in diggings in Sais, or Rosetta in another language. Prior to finding the stone, archaeologists had trouble deciphering hieroglyphs, but this stone is divided into 3 parts: hieroglyphs, the local domestic Egyptian language, and in Greek. One of the men who translated the Rosetta Stone was a Frenchman, and he realised that he could then read the names on the cartouches of the different Egyptian pharaohs, and that was a great leap in the process or progress of understanding the cartouches on all the Egyptian ruins. Nebanon was a rich temple accountant who was buried in the city of Karnak, or Thebes, and his tomb was adorned with riches and such, and here's an example of his what was found in his tomb, and presumably that's his body stuffed in a box. Ramses II was one of the most well-known of the great pharaohs in the 1200 BC period, when Egypt was rich and powerful. In the New Kingdom, in his 66 years of reign, he was considered the greatest of the pharaohs, building lots of monuments, obviously to himself and other things. He was considered a ruler's ruler and developed Egypt's wealth and economy. He had lots and lots of children. It is considered that Ramses II was the pharaoh in Moses' time, recorded in the Bible. Egypt's history is fairly interesting. It starts around about 6000 BC, and in the first dynasty period, and then it goes into the Old Kingdom dynasty period, where they started to have more of a structure of pharaohs and such. And then the Middle Kingdom period and the New Kingdom period was when Ramses II was one of the rulers over those 500 years. And the third intermediate period, the late period, Ptolemaic dynasty, and then the Roman period from 30 BC to 641 AD. Just a little bit of history about the British Museum. During the war between the French and England, 1700s, the British defeated Napoleon, obviously, and they seized a lot of Egyptian antiquities, and including the Rosetta Stone, and that formed the basis, or the bulk of the museum's artefacts, and they collected many artefacts after that. The Egyptian collection is huge, obviously. Of course, over time, the rich English donated their collections to the British Museum, and this is where the British Museum has so many different artefacts and statues and such, including over 140 mummies and coffins. But of course the largest collection of Egyptian memorabilia and artefacts, etc., is in Cairo, in the Cairo Museum. Originally, mummies were naturally preserved because of the dry climate in Egypt, but the University of New York realised that the process started to be developed around 5,600 years ago in Turin, where they would wrap mummies and embalm them in oil and resins and aromatic fragrances. Preservation of bodies was a profound influence from the Egyptian religion, and mummification was part of those rituals. So the body was preserved after death, and obviously their bodies were surrounded by their wealth in their tombs so that they lived comfortably in their afterlife. Mummification was an interesting process. They first removed the brain and turn it into a liquid form to remove it through the nose or through a cavity in the cranium and drain it out. And then the skull was filled with tree resins and fragrances to get rid of the rest of the brain tissue and stop the smell. The lumbar region was sliced open and the organs removed, and the heart especially was preserved in canopic jars, and other organs were salted down and also put in jars. The cavity was filled with a blend of aromatics, and the incisions were soaked in natron, which is a salt mix, and to disinfect the body. And the body was placed in state for around 35 to 70 days, a period of mourning. Natron, the salt mix, caused the body to dry out and dehydrate, and then the carcass was washed and covered with oil and other fragrances as an adhesive, and then the body was wrapped in linen and other covers, and depending on the social status of the deceased, the mummy was adorned with certain pieces of clothing and masks, shrouds and gold and stuff like that. That's about it for me in relation to the Egyptian display in the British Museum. The video was produced by myself, and it's the end of another exciting video of the Egyptian exhibition in the British Museum on our England tour 2009.